So I think it is fascinating to think about the idea that perhaps one day payments could completely disappear. That's what we're going to explore in this episode of Navigating Digital Payments.
Welcome to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline, bringing you the latest innovations, trends, and predictions about the future of payments.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Navigating Digital Payments. I'm David Daly. I look after the Discovery Hub here at Worldline, and I'm pleased to say I'm joined today by Denis Faivre, who is the Head of Innovation at Worldline. Hi Denis, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Great to have you joining us, Denis. So I gave this little tease right at the start, but really what we're going to be discussing today is the idea of autonomous payments, so payments being made on your behalf. And I'm really interested to hear from you later. What are some of the use cases around autonomous payments? Can they be trusted? And how do you think they're going to evolve into the future? But before we come on to that, I know you've been working on this topic of autonomous payments for quite some time. I'm interested to know what drew you to it? What made you passionate about this subject?
Well, I guess we all know that the digital revolution is ongoing, and there's some tremendous number of things that will change as a consequence of this. In particular, day after day, what we see is technologies that enable always smarter, always more autonomous applications. And if you think of autonomous cars, smart assistants, etc., at some point you cannot avoid thinking of situations when what we call autonomous payment will happen.
Okay, so it's good to draw the parallel a little bit there. So you mentioned autonomous cars, and I guess that's something most people are familiar with, the idea of a Tesla car going into auto mode and being able to do some of the driving automatically. And maybe this dream in the future that we will just sit around playing a game of Monopoly in the car whilst it drives us to our destination completely autonomously. But I think what you're saying is, firstly, autonomous payments is about how can that type of technology be applied to making a payment on your behalf, but also the more and more that devices and things are doing things autonomously, the more and more they will come up against a point where they have to pay for something autonomously as well. Is that what you're thinking, Denis, there?
Yes, I guess maybe let's make a parallel. If you are a parent, at some point you will enable your kids or your teenagers to spend money so that they can buy what they need or what they like, and this without having to refer to you. In this case, you will set global rules, you will define some limits, and that's it. You won't look into the details of the spendings, in which stores, to buy what exactly, except sometimes to update the rules and the limits and check that everything is fine, or sometimes to confirm exceptions. With more connected and more distributed and smarter systems, I guess you don't want to deal with each and every payment act that is to be done. And you neither want to accumulate dozens or even hundreds of micro subscriptions, which would become totally unmanageable at the end of the day. To give examples, one for the ink refill of the printer, one for the updates of your GPS, one for the yearly maintenance of the air conditioning, another one for the charging of the electric car, etc. So this is one level. And that's not all, because if you think of a smart agent which is capable of looking for the most interesting offers and combining them to arrange your next holiday trip, or if you think of your virtual concierge to which you will delegate the organization of some birthday party, or if you think of a smart attendant that will take care of your ordinary and regular needs, like running errands, restocking the fridge for the week, or buying school stationery, or booking a nice outing for the weekend, I think you at some point you will start to get the picture in which you can see a multiplicity of buying decisions based on a multiplicity of offers and possibly involving a multiplicity of vendors. And because of that, you making all this going off the limits of a plain old subscription model. So the point of autonomous payment is going beyond all that, all this automated payment, and reaching the point where autonomy can be reached.
Thank you for that, Denis. I guess it's maybe worth me mentioning now that in the paper that we published from the Worldline Discovery Hub last year, there was a whole chapter that you were involved in writing about autonomous payments. And I think one of the things that was really useful was it gave this really clear definition of what autonomous payments are. So let's briefly now hear an extract from that paper where it explains precisely what autonomous payments here, and then I want to come back to you and talk a little bit more about some of those use cases as well.
Autonomous payments are payment transactions triggered by an authorised virtual payment agent acting on behalf of the consumer. This payment agent can be part of an IoT device such as a smart refrigerator. It could also be a piece of software such as a printing application. Or it can take the form of a smart contract, which automatically triggers payments when certain conditions are met. Commentators sometimes refer to this as programmable money. In either case, the rules and boundaries for the payment are initially set by the user within a specific context, giving the payment agent the authority to activate and complete the payment on their behalf.
So at the end there, we heard about giving the payment agent the authority to activate and complete the payment on their behalf. And I like as well, Denis, you mentioned the example of having children and delegating certain levels of authority to your kids, something I'm familiar with. I wonder, with payments, you also mentioned sometimes we have lots of small micropayments, subscriptions, the ink cartridge in the printer that was also mentioned in that extract there. I always think there are some payments that probably we would all rather we had no involvement in, and they just happened automatically within some predefined conditions. On the other hand, I still feel like if it's a major purchase or a more interesting purchase, like a car or a holiday or a new camera, I think maybe sometimes I would like to be more involved in that step, because that feels like the emotional point where I'm making the decision to purchase something. So again, I'm just interested in your view. Do you think eventually all payments will become autonomous, or do you think actually there'll be some cases where people still want to be more personally involved in it?
I think autonomy is something you want for something that is less interesting to you. You don't want to take care of that. And conversely, there are situations, there are cases when you, as you pictured, you want to take care of them. So it's not a white and black situation. It's rather a continuum. And the difficulty will be at the boundary between what is interesting and what is less interesting. Probably there we are at the limits I was talking about before. But in general, I don't think we will switch to something fully autonomous, because of course what would be the point of having autonomous payment on buying a house? What would be the point of autonomous payment on buying a new car, or things that are especially important and sufficiently rare so that you can take care of that?
What that's making me realise is that there might be some payments that we always want to be involved in ourselves, but there are a lot where it would be more convenient if it was done on our behalf. But it's only more convenient, it's only useful if you can trust it to be done right, done in accordance with what you would like. So if suddenly I find my virtual assistant has ordered thousands of toilet rolls at a very high price that I don't need, that's not useful or convenient. It's actually just quite annoying. So I guess this point of trust is really it's really important. And I know that it was something else that was discussed in the paper from last year. So let's just hear an extract on that topic of trust, and then I'm interested, Denis, to get more of your views on that too.
An essential enabler for autonomous payments is assuring consumers that they can be trusted. To do this, the consumer must be fully in control, either by defining upfront the acceptable payment conditions or by being assured that controls afterwards will reverse any payment not in line with set expectations. To reach this objective, we consider that there are 4 cornerstones: identity and privacy, autonomy and consent, payment means, and finally, financial funding.
So, Denis, we heard there these 4 cornerstones. So could you say a bit more about which of those you think are the most important, and maybe also how you think they can be achieved practically?
Well, each of them brings a different aspect of the story, of course. Identity and privacy is important. Because it relates to the fact that smart agents and systems become kind of an extension of yourself in the digital world. So they will need to have access to some of your personal data and context, but it must be done in a proper way so that it avoids that no more than the information needed for a given purpose is disclosed. So there are technical solutions to do this. But the point is to do it in an easy way for the user. Regarding payment means, this is covered by a broad range of possibilities. On one hand, you will find the usual mechanisms based on cards, credit transfer, direct debit. And on the other hand, you will find newer ones such as digital currencies or smart contracts. And I guess it will open up interesting prospects. Regarding financial funding, I think it raises interesting questions, both for the consumer and the merchants, such as will I pay before, now, later? Who takes the risks? At this point, micropayments might be an interesting starting point. And finally, and maybe it's the most important in my opinion, autonomy consent is a quite tricky one, because there is indeed a balance between the latitude you give to a smart agent and the level of control you want to keep. Finding the best way to express and to ensure this balance is quite challenging. And I think there is a lot to invent in this area so that the system properly understands that you don't want that many paper rolls.
Coming back to the toilet roll example, but it's true, isn't it, that I guess it's like whenever you're delegating something to a person or a machine, you obviously want the maximum convenience, and that comes by delegating as much as possible to the person or the machine. But at the same time, the more you delegate, the more there is a risk that it'll be out of alignment with what you want. And even simple things, I think. So, for example, if you had a virtual agent that was buying your food shopping for you, well, I could set a €100 limit, say, for the week. But if it then just buys me €100 worth of mushrooms, it's still not a good outcome. So it goes beyond simple thresholds, I suppose, and simple spending limits to also other behaviours that you expect from it. I mean, so it strikes me just as it's interesting, but it's also quite a complex area. And how do you think people can build up that kind of trust in what ultimately are probably going to be AI-powered, bots that transact on your behalf?
I'm not sure about that, but my feeling is that it could be something progressive. I mean, first you will start with relatively strict rules and low limits, and progressively you will increase the level of latitude you give to an agent. So maybe there will be some kind of dialogue between the agent and you about what if I ordered more than this? Would you care? Would you mind? Something like that. And I imagine the agent progressively learning about what you expect, what you tolerate, what you, let's say, mind, and what you reject or even refuse. So it's something that could be a way to develop that. If you think of another parallel, it can be with the settings in social networks, privacy settings. It's always very difficult to express what you want actually. You have sometimes a relatively complex user interface to define what you want, what you don't want. But at the end of the day, you always discover new cases that are not covered by that or misunderstood, so to say, by the system. That's why I was saying there is a lot to invent, because we are dealing with the expression, the formalization of something that is maybe clear to you in your mind, but not necessarily easy to express.
So if we come round then a little bit to more thinking about the future, Denis, where do you think autonomous payments are going to go next? And what do you think are going to be some of the exciting developments people need to be watching out for?
Well, I'm happy to see that you're always trying to look even further, David. An interesting development for me of autonomous payment could be that they become bidirectional. I mean, sometimes you pay, sometimes you are paid, because you earn from a contribution you made with your connected devices, with your systems. Just to give examples, you got a weather station on your roof, and it collects continuously weather data, and this data can be useful to someone else, and so you get some compensation from that. Or you have a parking space which is free when you are away. So what about monetizing that with some possibility for someone to rent it? Or even your car if you don't use it, whatever. So, but we could even go further. If the resources that are shared, like I just mentioned, are also something that could be combined with someone else's resources to deliver something more valuable, it can become even more interesting. Again, a basic example, but I guess it illustrates my thinking. You could book at once 2 adjacent parking spaces from 2 different owners, because you have a trailer or RV, and it's useful to you. You don't have to take care of finding the owners and synchronizing things, because the smart agents deal with that. And conversely, the owners will receive a part of the compensation of that. So it's something that could be pooling the resources. And I guess we can even imagine even more elaborated ways to get value out of that.
So it's not just autonomous payments, but autonomous earnings, I guess, is what you're describing there. So that's quite interesting. So I do want to come back, Denis, and ask you this question of: do you think we might never have to pay for anything ever again? Before I do that, I just want to remind people where they can download this report. You visit worldline.com, click on Knowledge Hub, and then click on Scientific Reports, and you can access the Navigating Digital Payments report there. I also just want to remind people that if you want to get in touch with us, let us know a topic that you'd like us to cover, give us any feedback at all, you can email in on ndp-podcast@worldline.com. And of course, my usual reminder to please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review and a rating. So, Denis, coming back to this question, do you think we might one day never have to pay for anything ever again?
So it depends on what you call paying first, and I think it will be the root of my answer. Basically, a payment is a consent. I don't think we want to give up on this. It's rather the opposite. We don't want to give up consenting to payments. So through autonomous payments, you may, let's say, define some kind of space in which your consent is implicitly established, and therefore you accept to pay, and the agent has the latitude to use that. But outside of that, you want to explicitly consent. So that's why I don't think you will reach a situation where you never pay for anything by yourself. And so there is also another point, which is that if you are talking about fully eliminating the friction around the consent, here we are all in. I mean, it's important, and it's one of the basics of the payment to find how to eliminate this friction, make it as smooth, as easy as possible. What we want at the end of the day is pay as we think, I guess, rather than anything else.
I love that. Pay as you think, because I think you're absolutely right. I want to make a payment only when I want to make a payment, but I don't particularly enjoy filling in a long credit card number and a code and then having a two-factor authentication or a phone call from my bank. The friction is not what I enjoy. But then you're so right. The dilemma or the tension is, how do you know that someone is consenting to make their payment, whilst on the other hand having the bare minimum of friction, as you say, ideally that I just think it and it happens. And that I think is quite an interesting challenge, I guess, for the payments industry that's coming up. So Denis, I guess if we summarize, it feels like we've covered a lot of ground in a short time there, starting out by really thinking about what do we mean by autonomous payments, and what are some of the use cases that we're already seeing or will see in the near future. We talked about that trust topic and being able to progressively trust machines to make payments more on your behalf. And then I think really interesting to talk about the future and where this could go, and particularly that idea of bi-directional autonomous payments or autonomous earnings. And I think that conclusion there at the end was really insightful of you to say that it's all tied into reducing friction but maintaining that critical aspect of consent. So Denis, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, David.
And I will just finish off, as always, with thanking our listeners for joining us today as we navigate digital payments.
Thank you for listening to the Navigating Digital Payments podcast, brought to you by Worldline. Join us next time to learn more about the latest innovations, trends, and predictions for the future of payments.